Hello, everybody. Brenna here, your 1-3 sacral manifesting generator and the self-proclaimed human design HBIC. I am so excited to do this video because it came from a specific request from Tiffany, who is one of the beautiful projectors that is over in my Patreon. So thank you, Tiffany, for the topic of today's video. And we're going to deep dive into 3 specific powerhouses that are in the entertainment industry, as you may have guessed from the title of this video, who they may be already. And so looking at where they have some strengths, some areas or blind spots that they may have overcome through their career where they excel, getting into the nitty-gritty of why they are so good at their craft and what makes them magnetic using their human design and following their life purpose, and how you can also look at where these indicators may be in your human design chart and astrology as well. So without further ado, let's get to it. The first powerhouse we're going to look at today is a much requested Lady Gaga. I've had quite a few requests all of last year, actually, wanting to look into her chart, where her strengths are, how amazing she is. We already know this at her craft. And I have so many March babies, Aries in particular, of course, that want to know more about her human design. So when we're looking at Lady Gaga's chart, some of the areas that I thought were most fascinating were actually the fact that she has a completely undefined throat center in human design, in addition to being a generator, which I can see so clearly in her career. And why is that, right? She is incredibly talented. And also her choreography is very indicative of generators being very full embodied in whatever their craft is. But something I love about her is that she makes dance moves and choreography for people of all different body types and abilities and capabilities when it comes to dancing. Very generator with their lower sacral define. Obviously, they're going to have their sacral define if they're a generator. You may not know that depending on how well versed you are in human design, but a generator is always going to have their sacral center defined. And when we're zooming out and kind of looking at what chakras or energy centers, as they're known in human design, are colored in versus what ones are undefined, you can see how all of her definition sits lower. Now, 2 things that I'm going to point out that a lot of you will know if you have the channel of struggle, I'm going to call you out here, is the fact that Lady Gaga also has the channel of struggle. It's actually the 28 channel here that sits connecting the spleen to the root center, and how she's somebody who's incredibly strong-minded, able to overcome anything that's handed her way in the face of adversity, right? Especially just with somebody that has fibromyalgia and being able to dance and still perform the way that she does and struggling with that. I highly recommend watching her documentary on Netflix if you are interested in her and haven't already, or your reminder to go ahead and watch it back. But I have a lot of clients that have this Scorpio meets Capricorn gate placement. Now, where does this sit in her natal chart in tropical astrology with her Pluto, as well as not tropical astrology, but in her design side, in her human design body graph, and her design sun? So anything that's on our personality side is something that we know to generally be true. It's something that is in our natal chart in tropical astrology. Whereas anything on the design side is something that we learn to overcome throughout our lifetime, right? So if we're looking for Gaga, right, she has a gate 38 Capricorn sun known as the gate of the fighter. And it's so funny because if you think about the lyrics to her songs, even early on from her earlier albums, the album that Poker Face was on, I don't remember the name of it. I know I have it in CD format somewhere, but how she's incredibly strong-willed and dedicated to her craft. A lot of you know, part of my lore is I worked in the arts and music management scene in New York City in my early 20s. And I had a couple clients that I worked with that actually were in the same circuit with her simultaneously. And I can really see their how Gaga would always perform, right? A lot of you have seen those videos, for those of you who are fans of hers or she's on your For You page, those videos where she was performing as if she was at Madison Square Garden, whether she had 5, 10, or 10,000 people in the parking lots of wherever she was performing. She always gave it her all, which is very much indicative. Gate of the fighter, Aries tenacity, and a fellow Scorpio moon like me. Actually, I have the same Scorpio gate placement, gate 44, that Lady Gaga does too. So it makes us very, very moody, but also really great at the arts for that reason, because we love to express ourselves creatively, and our work really is a good outlet for fellow Scorpio moons who have this gate placement, or if you just have gate 44 in your body graph. Now, having an undefined throat center, I always look at people like this, and I always know undefined throat centers, completely open throat centers in her case, that these are people who are incredibly gifted songwriters, storytellers. It makes sense that she changes her persona, changes her vocal inflection, the way that she communicates in different circumstances, being able to have a mutable voice based on whoever she's speaking to, still standing firm in her opinions and who who she is. We always know that she's Lady Gaga, but she can use a tone that matches the energy of the person that's in front of her. Now, a couple things that I'll say in relation to my good friend Igor, who is a generator with an undefined throat and a Pisces Mercury like Lady Gaga, as well as an Aries. So a lot of overlap there. You can understand why he was one of the ones that requested her review here, is a few things, right? So as you guys know, those of you who followed me for a while, especially over on TikTok, I love talking about incarnation crosses when it comes to somebody's life theme and their life purpose. So one of those main elements is looking at somebody's incarnation cross, in which Lady Gaga is starting her transit. So from 38 to 42, we come to this place where there is a little bit of like a reintegration of who am I? Why am I going in this direction? What am I going to be doing? And what we're looking at is the 4 gates of her incarnation cross. We have Aries, Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer, all of the cardinal signs. So this is taking into consideration that she is an Aries sun with gate 17 as her personality sun. So one of the 6 flavors of the type of Aries that Lady Gaga is, right? So gate 17, whenever I'm looking at somebody's personality sun, I look at the energy center in which it sits. So in her ajna, we see gate 17 highlighted. It's the only one that's in her undefined ajna in her human design body graph. And we can see that it doesn't make a connection to the throat. If it did, she would have a defined throat and ajna center. So what's interesting about this transit that she's going to be going through is that it's going to be another time for her to reflect on her opinions, what's going well, feelings that she may have around authority figures in her life, maybe people that control her music, to be more educated in that. But getting a little bit more in tune. Gate 38, as you know that I mentioned, these 2 gate placements here, gate of the fighter, gate of provocation, as we know Lady Gaga in the meat dress, so many elements of provocation that she's used to her advantage, which is really part of her life theme throughout her lifetime, is also going to be extra activated, but it's also very grounding for her to have that outward expression of provoking other people. This is a Cancer gate placement, especially those of you who are born in the first week of July. Usually have this as your personality sun in your human design body graph. What's really interesting also about somebody with this incarnation cross is that there's somebody who is always going to provoke an understanding of basic fundamental human rights and values, always advocating for the underdog, right? People who are underrepresented on the world stage, and has really been able to share her spotlight as a great form of advocacy, right? Also very Pisces Mercury in gate 22. So gate 22 is also the gate of grace and charm. It sits in the solar plexus center, the emotional center. Gate 22's gift is teaching us how to be graceful, how to be charming, but also knowing when we have to commit our energy to something versus when we need to rest. Now, I'm going to read a little excerpt from the Book of Destinies that you guys know if you have watched me over on live, whether it's on here or on TikTok. And this is a little excerpt about her life theme and her life purpose, so you can get familiar with the types of ways you can see Lady Gaga enacting on her incarnation cross in real time. And I'm also really excited to see how she activates these placements, or this placement in particular, over the next 4 years, where she's faced with this kind of resurgence of this energy, pushing the envelope in ways that seem exciting. I think we can even see that with the release of Abracadabra recently. So with your conscious sun in gate 17, you have plenty of opinions about what you consider logical and right in life. You can dissect arguments that you consider invalid, pointing out faulty logic and routines that do not help people. When you observe potentials that are not being met because of incompetence or faulty reasoning, you can be triggered to point out how everyone is going about things the wrong way. Voicing opinions freely can seem like what is needed, but when you speak out of turn, it can make your life very difficult, especially when everyone takes your viewpoints as personal criticism, especially because she has the channel of judgment as well. Understand that no one likes to be criticized, and it is vital to recognize your great gift, which is to modify systems and unconscious habits, and not necessarily the people operating within those systems or living out those habits. Your own energy type and authority will guide you to make good choices throughout your life. So this is, of course, just a very basic initial overview. I'm only doing about, 8 minutes or so per person here, just to get you guys familiar with how to look at this and look at examples of how to use their human design in real time, people enact on their natural aura in real time, and how when you really live a life of alignment where you're willing to push past the struggle as Lady Gaga, when you're willing to be somebody that stands up for the people that are underrepresented represented in our communities and willing to listen to your own inner voice no matter what, that's when you really shine and do become successful. As we know, Gaga is definitely not one to take no for an answer. So the next person I'm going to read for was also a request from Tiffany, specifically one of my beautiful projectors, as I mentioned in the intro of this video, and she wanted me to cover the amazing Miley Cyrus. So for my fellow Sages that are in the group that are watching this, of which I know I have quite a few, this is also going to be an interesting one for you to take note of. Okay, so I just updated her chart just to make sure that I had it correctly. I realized I put in December 23rd instead of November. As I was saying Sag, and I was like, wait, that's Capricorn. She's not a Cap for sure. So looking at the other elements of her human design body graph. And one of the things that I'll point out right away for any of my mutable signs, so my Pisces, my Virgos, my Sages, and my Geminis, Miley Cyrus has the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix as her incarnation cross and her life theme. So it's interesting because although she won't experience this transit until she's in her later 30s, 38, like Lady Gaga, she is at post her Saturn return, right? Her Saturn being in Aquarius, and in that kind of sweet spot, right? We have some other transits and things that happen in between that time for people, perfection years, things along those lines. But I want to highlight specifically on the influence of her work, her writing, her songwriting, her singing, her performances based on her Incarnation Cross. And of course, I'm going to start by reading a little excerpt from the Book of Destinies about this. An incurable romantic, you are driven by your quest for intimacy with life. Unless you are really clear about your own needs, you can find yourself literally looking for love and deep experiences in all the wrong places. Talk about a Disney child gone wild. Always a bit ahead of your time. You chase impossible dreams using any means to pursue them, wondering how they are so enticing and elusive as you stretch to catch them, grasp them only for a moment, and then crash and burn, only to rise again sometime later from the ashes of your experiences. And on you go, headlong into the next pursuit. In your passage through life, you affect people in profound ways as you get them to appreciate where you are pointing. Despite romantic disappointments and often because of them, you enter into a process of self-transformation. You find that as you transform, so do the lives of those closest to you. So for those of you who are current followers of Miley Cyrus, you can see how there's also been an emphasis on change with her parents, right? Specifically her dad post her Saturn return, which is very much so on brand for a Gate 19 Aquarius Saturn. Gate 19 is all about sensing people's wants and needs. It's known as the gate of wanting. And romantic pursuits, but also just from a love-centered space of the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix, her divorce, her relationship with her dad. Who are the people that affect us, right, from the embodiment of the place of love, right? And how do we get thrown into being able to alchemize our pain through those experiences, right? And be like, okay, well, how do I feel? How am I processing this? Where am I going? And why am I going in that direction? And the reason I love Sag women especially so much is because they always have this air of detachment, even though from Miley's placements, she's incredibly loving, incredibly deep, especially because she has a Scorpio moon as well. We're seeing a theme here, conjunct her Scorpio Mercury as well. So a lot of Scorpio, a lot of like fire, but feeling behind her voice. I think that's a beautiful way to encapsulate the energy of somebody who has Sag and Scorpio in their chart. Fire and feeling, especially for a Scorpio moon and Mercury conjunct one another, right? And feeling that emphasis there. So what's interesting is that when we talk about this from a human design perspective and how somebody's circuitry works, a lot of you guys know I'm a manifesting generator. I have quite a few manifesting generators that I'm connected with through this platform and a couple others. And quite a few of you are also emotional authorities, right? So what happens when you're an emotional authority, and using Miley as an example here, is that you get hit with this like knee-jerk reaction of like, okay, I have a feeling I really want to do this thing, or I really need to get divorced from this person, or I need to run away, whatever it is. And then you come to your emotional wave. Now, with impulses, right, or knowing how she feels right away and being able to communicate that, it's pretty easy for Miley to be able to do that because her 3420 channel, the channel of power, if you will, is reflected in her conscious side of her human design body graph. So things about herself that she already knows to be true. I should correct myself and say the channel of charisma. I realize I said the channel of power, but that's the 3457 channel that I think everybody that I've met that's a man gen in the last 2 weeks has had this channel. But channel of charisma, she's already aware of that. She knows she's charismatic. She knows how to schmooze. She's known that since she was very young, being a child star, right? And also that because of her family, and really knowing when to to cut the cord, when to give up the ghost, when she's not feeling like she's in the mood for something anymore. Also very Scorpio Mercury and Scorpio Moon. Now what's interesting is the specific channel that makes up Miley's emotional wave is entirely red, meaning that it took her time to learn how to process emotions over time. Full circle back to the fact that, she has an Incarnation Cross as a right cross of Sleeping Phoenix, right? If you notice commonality here, her channel of charisma, the 3420 channel, is in her Incarnation Cross. Not every Incarnation Cross is going to have a full channel. And one of her gates of her emotional wave, gate 59, which is the gate of bond making, the gate of mating, essentially. How do we connect to create more viable offspring in a literal sense, but also just in a creative sense? Any gates that come out of the emotional center, the solar plexus center, are very creative, fertile gates in human design. Now, what I also really want to highlight in Miley's chart is that she's a perfect example of a manifesting generator as a 2-5 that's really enacting on her energy type very well. She still is under the umbrella of entertainer, but the way that she's entertained us has shifted forms, right? There's always a red thread that has run all of her projects together, and that's being an entertainer. Again, having the channel of charisma. Anyone that has this channel, especially when it's on your personality side, is going to entertain in some way, is going to be a charismatic in some way. Couple that with Sag and also being born into the industry, right, helped her to expedite that process, right? Some generators and man-gens, if you get stuck in that hopeless romantic, energy, no matter how many resources she could have had at her disposal, she could have really let that taken her down. But she didn't, right? She knew when to get back up. So she said this in an interview with her dad recently, or about her dad recently, that like knowing when to let certain things go. And it's very indicative of her placements. Also, she's right on the cusp of having that Cancer and Leo Mars, actually. So Cancer Mars in her case, where we just had a retrograde there. So maybe feeling a little bit slower. Maybe she was going a little bit slower recently, and not really feeling as motivated, or there was, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 1 step back, kind of this confusion tango that we were all doing. Finally, now it's direct. We get a little bit of a break. Then I'll have a couple more days before any more retrogrades, Venus going retrograde next. But all that to say, I really see Miley being able to enact on her life purpose really well. Obviously, I don't know things that happen behind closed doors. No, nor am I somebody that likes to dig into the lives of anybody in that way without their consent. So I always do these readings from a point of ethics, right? But also knowing that if there's certain things that people have talked about when it comes to astrology, their design, things of that nature, I use pretty much what's already out there just through the lens of human design, which I also is just an important thing to consider whenever we're looking at anyone's chart and sharing information online, right? With any public information that we can find. So looking, again at her transits, really living out her life purpose in a great way with her Incarnation Cross, definitely seeing how romantic relationships have affected her life purpose because of being the right cross of the Sleeping Phoenix, and allowing herself to lean into morphing and identity and shifting and what excites her from terms of projects with that channel of charisma and being a manifesting generator, following what she's responding to that is exciting for her sacral in real time, probably giving herself a little bit more than a day or two to look over contracts, things like that, also being an emotional authority. Also really important. Last but not least, I wanted to cover Elizabeth Olsen per the request of Gabe, who is one of our magnificent manifesting generators in our community. So also thank you, Gabe, for this request. And Elizabeth Olsen, oh my gosh, one of the things I noticed right away, as you already know, I'm going to say because you've been around for a minute with me, is whenever I see somebody that has the 4437 channel in their human design body graph, I know that they are doing things completely differently than the family they grew up in. And if there's anybody that's had more recent career success, I would say maybe edging up on longer career success in some ways, right? I would say in the entertainment space, obviously the Olsen twins are iconic and successful with their clothing company called The Row. I followed them for many years, since being little, right? But anyone with the 4037 channel is doing things very differently from the way that they grew up. So I think it's so interesting to see how different Elizabeth's entertainment career path as an actress has changed and shifted versus the one of her sisters, right? And her life being a little bit different from her sisters too. I also think it's funny because she is an Aquarius that is married to a Pisces, and I am a Pisces that's engaged to an Aquarius. So it is an underrated yet elite couple. So I see you, Elizabeth, if I do say so myself. myself. But we have what's interesting here. This is the one of the waves or the channels that makes up one of her emotional authority waves. So one of those that may be a little bit understated, a little bit more understated. And you could see here as well, similar to what I shared with Miley, is that her channel of charisma, the 3420 channel, is actually completely undefined, or excuse me, is completely in her design side. So her charisma isn't something that she was aware of over time. I can also imagine growing up with the Olsen twins as your sisters, that it was a little bit you have a unique experience, right? Especially in the early 2000s, late 90s, where they were like front and center and their personalities were so different that we know of right from the outside, right? We grow and evolve and change and things shift over time. Also in the actor and actress space or the acting space in general, things are going to shift a little bit. So what's interesting is I could have even gone in chronological order with time. We could have done Miley, Elizabeth, and Lady Gaga at the same time. But Lady Gaga, Miley, and Elizabeth, something that they all have in common is that they all have a 5 in their human design profile. And for my 5-1s who like to complain about the projections that people put on you, I want to say this, right? Being in the acting space is exactly the iconic energy of like HBIC energy, not giving an F about what people think about you as a 5-line person, right? No matter how you can be the best actress in the entire world and someone just isn't going to like the roles that you play. Elizabeth Olsen is incredible. She's in the Marvelverse, right? Or whatever it's called. Marvel movies, right? Marvelverse, metaverse, no, whatever it's called. You guys will know. But there's people who are just not gonna like that genre of movies, right? And that doesn't mean that she's bad. It's just all about preferences. And I think for any 5-1s to remember that, or anybody with the 5 in their profile, people have preferences, and you not being their preference is also not your problem. Now, what you'll also see as a common factor or a correlation between Miley and Elizabeth is that they both also have the channel of charisma in their Incarnation Cross. So their life theme being somebody who's meant to be charismatic throughout their lifetime, and figuring out what that charisma is going to look like for both of them between 38 to 42 is going to be really interesting. Like, who are they seeking out being charismatic for? Do they still want to be in the public eye? Is that something that still interests them? Is going to be really interesting to watch, because they've also been in the spotlight collectively for some time. Now, some other fellow Aquarians that also have this Incarnation Cross that are famous: Michael Jordan, Rene Russo, Yoko Ono, and Paris Hilton. So considering that too, looking at how the differentiation, and even in their energy types, maybe I'll do a video about just everyone that has this Incarnation Cross and the differences in their charts, how they're similar in their life theme, but how they're different. We can see charisma in all of those people. Yoko Ono, charisma in one way or another, but maybe more of a polarizing presence. But I'm going to read to you again a little excerpt from the Book of Destiny to continue on with our theme here, just to get in the headspace of understanding Elizabeth Olsen's chart and how she lives out her life theme. You are one of the busiest people you know, but you feel compelled to convey this sense of busyness to everyone else. Because you are driven by the need to accomplish, under the shadow, right? You must be clear about your commitments. That said, you still tend to bite off more than you can chew, whether or not you are aware of it. Even if it doesn't make sense, you were always induced into being active, and you can truly move mountains to achieve what might seem impossible to lesser mortals, which I love how like lesser mortals being somebody that is the Scarlet Witch, right? Lesser mortals, tongue twister, makes so much sense. As a manifesting generator, you have an enormous capability and endurance, yet sometimes you feel driven for no good reason, except that you have an intense drive to be and stay busy. It is useless to compare yourself and your achievements with anybody else, but there is an enormous difference between being busy just to be busy, driven by a sense of obligation or an unconscious urge, and being busy because you have an inner certainty about being active and committed. It's worthwhile examining what desires or motivations are at the root of this drive to achieve that pulses within you. And what's really interesting is that that's true for almost every manifesting generator, myself included, is that one of the first places that we talk about deconditioning is understanding what are you busy doing and what is the purpose in what your busyness is creating, right? Is your busyness creating anything, or are you mentally, emotionally busy just for the sake of being busy, right? And so some of the things that I would hope that Elizabeth is busy about, as we see, and I would encourage that I would highlight that she already is, also being a Cancer moon, is being busy about being an inspiration, right? Busy about just being really good at her craft. And thankfully, she is in an industry that keeps her busy, right? For very condensed, long days, long hours, doing something that she loves in theory, right? She is successful at it. Although generators and manifesting generators can phone in the work of being successful at something, even if it doesn't light them up, because they have the energy for grunt work. So paying attention to that as a generator and a manifesting generator is also really important. Some other kind of heavy hitters, she has an Aquarius stellium, so quite a few Aquarius placements in her chart, as well as Capricorn placements, definitely keeping her stoic, connected with people, the Aquarian humanitarian, very sensitive about feelings, but maybe overcommits herself to people, places, and things a little bit more, which is where we can start to see that charisma kind of seep out or diminish a little bit. And that can be really exhausting to feel like as an Aquarius and any big three Aquarius placements to keep up appearances without having that healthy time for detachment. So hopefully, fingers crossed, she gives herself ample amounts of downtime in between her roles. For those of you who are fans of hers or follow her more closely, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But definitely somebody who's really good at pursuing her own life path and her life purpose. Now, what's interesting is we'll probably see her develop in terms of a sense of closeness with her close friends and family over time, being somebody who grows into that North Node and Gate 37 of the Gate of family and friendship. Pisces Gate placement, we're going to be activated by all of our Pisces transits right now and really feeling that. So something else for her to kind of keep an eye out for. And really seeing how all of her defined centers, sitting in the lower parts of her body, she's a completely open crown and ajna. So the overthinking can also be very real. Having that a lot of anxious thoughts and not knowing where to go with that, right? There's no direct plug from the sacral into the mind, but being busy probably is something that was even unconscious to Elizabeth or is unconscious to Elizabeth, or having trouble understanding again what to be busy about. So we'll be curious to see. We probably won't know this from the outside, although maybe she'll give interviews where she's transparent in the next couple of years, getting a little bit ahead of the curve and saying like, okay, I've had so much success up until this point. Where do I want to go? Why am I going this direction? And what exactly am I being busy about? So this was a quick little guide on looking at 3 very influential, very entertaining entertainers in the acting and music space. If you guys have any other requests, I take them specifically from people that are over in my Patreon, whether you are a paid or unpaid member. So if you want to go ahead and subscribe over there, go ahead and join us. I have some exclusive tips that I post over there and nowhere else. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions or any other elements that you want me to talk about based on the 3 charts that have sat in front of you and other videos outside of celebrities just making video tutorials for you about understanding your life theme, your incarnation cross, your energy type, any of the above, please let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and enjoy. See you soon.